Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to David's Den. I'm David and I make videos about Stephen King, his novels, his short stories, and any adaptations that were made for film or television. Today we're finally, after taking some time off to look at Gwendy's final task, we are getting back to the Strawberry Spring Vlogs, which was a podcast based on the short story found in the Night Shift collection by Stephen King, published in 1978. It has a distinction of being the first ever podcast adaptation of a Stephen King work. You can start at the beginning of the podcast and listen to my thoughts by clicking this card right here. Otherwise, we're going to jump right into episode 4, Drive Slow, Walk Fast. I may as well go ahead and tell you spoilers for all things through the end of the short story Strawberry Spring and through the end of episode 4 of the podcast. Here we go. So I'm assuming you're caught up and there's no need to go through the synopsis at this point. We open in 1976. He's at the car. The blood's on the car. He sees the letter from Spring Hill Jack and it's saying, I can't wait to get reacquainted. We've been talking about the schizophrenia element and the dissociative personality element that's at play here that we've known about because of the short story, and now we're watching the seeds and the pieces be laid out for us in the storytelling on the podcast. The letter starts, "Without you, there can be no me." What the f***? Yeah, it's telling us right there as long as you're tuned in to listen to it. I use your card to move some things. It's time to get reacquainted. Let's just keep this between you and me for now, which we discussed in the last podcast vlog when he first saw the letter and his thoughts about the police and how he doesn't know where he is because he has these blackouts during the fog. Congratulations on the baby. So now we have Henry going, do I go to the police? How long has he been watching me? I can't let anything happen to Rachel and the baby. I can't make the same mistake twice. Do I go, what? Okay, so now we have, do I go to the police? I can't make the same mistake twice. And I need to figure out what I missed before I go to the police so I don't make the same mistake twice. So we're suddenly back in 1968 and we're hopefully going to find out what mistake he made. So I love the way they're fleshing out the present day 1976 storyline that we don't get any of outside of the fact that he has a kid already. His wife is pregnant in the podcast. He sees blood on the car and he's wondering, oh my God, my wife wants to know where I was last night. I can't tell her. I don't remember. She thinks I was with another woman, and I'm afraid that maybe I was. And why am I afraid to open the trunk? So we're getting all of this fleshed out story, along with him being a journalist back in 1968, a journalism major working for the school newspaper. So we're back in 1968. We get a quick recap. There's still a lockdown on campus. There's still a curfew to make sure that people are in and safe from Spring Hill Jack. We're at the paper and Henry's having a conversation with Anne, his editor. All I need is one great story and I can make it. One song, glory, one story before I go. I don't know. I went for it.
One song to leave behind.
So they have that conversation and Chelsea bursts in, who works at the paper. And if you remember, whose father is Captain Spencer. In present day, he's Chief Spencer of the police force. And she's like, you guys, in her little bratty voice, her self-righteous voice, my dad is putting undercover cops everywhere and ends up writing this scathing article that comes out the next morning about the violation of our rights. That's a part of the short story, but it's not really beefed up. It's mentioned that there's a faction on campus that really thinks that, and they're protesting the police presence. But ultimately, everyone's kind of feeling like there's a killer on the loose. Why not put police around? That's not really in the short story. And I felt a little, as I was listening to it, like, are we getting too deep into it? And I love that as he's walking away from the paper, Henry's voiceover narration is saying, I didn't see quite the big deal. If it would help catch the guy, I think it's okay. I'm not sure Anne even knew what she was up in arms about. So I think it kind of redeemed the tone of the story when it came to this plot point, while also embellishing it and letting it fill some extra time on the podcast. Oh my God, I totally forgot my actual copy of the book that I have highlights because I need to find things for you. On the podcast, as he's walking home and we're hearing the footsteps, I love the way the sound effects are being used, if they're mixed a little oddly at times. He has this great kind of thought, internal soliloquy about how Spring Hill Jack is definitely a man and the fog is his woman, it's his lover, it's his accomplice, and New Sharon College The fear on campus is what's trapped in the middle. It's not word for word, but it's pretty damn close, right from the short story. Spring-Heeled Jack was a man. No one seemed to doubt that, but the fog was his accomplice, and it was female. Or so it seemed to me. It was as if our little school was caught between them, squeezed in some crazy lover's embrace, part of a marriage that had been consummated in blood. It is so clear that the writers of this podcast really loved and honored this original short story, the material. I appreciate that. However else they changed it, the love for the source material is evident. And we're going to see even more of that in the very next scene. After he gets back to the dorm, Kevin shows up and they have a conversation that in the short story happens with his roommate, not just his friend Kevin / the DJ at the radio / the voice in his head, possibly, we think, from the on the radio conversation that he was having. But all of that aside, Kevin is there. He's like, hey, it's going to snow. Look at the sky. It's pink. And this means snow. And haven't you ever heard of a strawberry spring? And almost word for word from the short story, strawberry spring is like Indian summer, he said, only much more rare. You get a good Indian summer in this part of the country once every 2 or 3 years. A spell of weather like we've been having is supposed to come only every 8 or 10. It's a false spring, a lying spring. Like Indian summer is a false summer. My own grandmother used to say strawberry spring means the worst norther of the winter is still on the way. And the longer this lasts, the harder the storm. He says almost word for word that exact passage in the dialogue that we have on the podcast. But what I never thought of, and I've read this short story probably 6 or 7 times, 3 of those in the last month, what I never caught before, and I was saying in the last vlog about episode 3, why are we starting the story here? Hasn't fog ever triggered these reactions in him? Why didn't we get that story? And then it just hit me while I was listening. Every 8 to 10 years. How old was he when the car accident happened that killed his wife, his mother, and his brother? Because quite frankly, let's just say, sake of argument, he was somewhere between 10 and 12. 8 to 10 years later, he would be college age. This might be the first time it's triggered, and that's in keeping with Strawberry Springs. It's not said explicitly that the accident happened in Strawberry Spring, but there was a lot of dense fog. So, yeah, I never caught that before, and I'm really excited I did. It actually lines up when I thought it was a problem. But so, just like the short story with the roommate, Kevin says, hey, let's go over and play some pool. I'll spot you a 10. No, thanks, man. I gotta study. It's midterms. He can't think, so he goes over to see Rachel. On his way there, it starts snowing, just like Kevin said it would. He puts his tongue out. It's like, I haven't done this since I was a kid. And he smiled. I haven't smiled since, my mother and my brother died. It's been so long since I've smiled. It feels good. And then he loses track of time. And hours later, he shows up at Rachel's. Hours. No idea where he's been. So he shows up there. Come on, it's so romantic. Let's go out and make snow angels. I'm from the South. I've never made a snow angel before. So they're out there. They're having this romantic evening kind of out in the snow. Sirens start. My first thought was, okay, we already had this. We did this in the last episode and it was the couple making out. But this time it's not a couple making out. This time it's Adele Perkins. It's Adele Perkins in the pod and Adele Parkins in the short story. It's just like Floyd Tibbets and let's try saying that correctly. It's just like Floyd Tibbets and Ned Tibbets in Salem's Lot to the miniseries. Why did you need to change the name? It's one damn letter. My first thought when I heard it was, oh, is that somebody's accent saying Perkins instead of Parkins? But no, it's consistent. All of the characters call her Adele Perkins. But the death is exactly like it is in the short story. And I'm going to read to you the passage from the short story, which is described to Henry and Rachel, almost word for word, by the police officer. He killed her and left her propped up behind the wheel of her 1964 Dodge to be found the next morning. Of course, in the conversation, it's he propped her up behind the wheel of her 64, it's some sports car, it's not a Dodge. Propped her up? Yeah, he had to. Because they found part of her in the back seat and part of her in the trunk. And written in blood on the windshield, this time fact instead of rumor, which we covered on the last pod, were the words, ha, ha. Now there is something written on the windshield here in the podcast. I keep pointing down at my phone, which has my notes, because this is where I listen to my podcast on, as if you could see or it matters to you. Wait, where is it? It's Catch Me If You Can, I think. I thought I made a note of this. Did I not make... Yes, there it is. Catch me if you can. Whew, for a second there I wasn't remembering the exact phrasing, and I thought I hadn't made the note that I thought I had made, but I did make it, so we're all good now. He writes, catch me if you can. He's taunting the police. It goes hand in hand with the Zodiac killer, which is mentioned in the short story. It's mentioned in the pod. Anne says they have the Zodiac out west. We have Spring Heel Jack in the east. We need to catch the story.
One song before I go, glory.
And she's mad that she didn't get to coin the name, if you remember, because that's what would have made or broken. That's what would make or break, is how you should say that, the story. So we're getting this taunting by the killer of the police. And we're going to get back to that theme of the Zodiac and how it mirrors in a little bit. So Rachel, of course, is upset and distraught after they find this crime scene. Please, can you stay with me tonight? Of course, I will. And he goes back to stay with her and says, I have to call Anne. You know, I'm a journalist. It's my job. We need to get a scoop on the story. Nobody else knows this. In fact, shortly in the podcast, he thinks all these people asleep in the dorm room, sleeping peacefully and happy. They don't know somebody else has died tonight yet. They'll find out in the morning. I envy them. This moment of peace. But that's happening as he leaves, and the reason he leaves Rachel's apartment is because she's like, you always spend time with Anne. I'm a journalist. It's my job. Don't get upset about this. I just want to call her so I can tell her we have a breaking story. And Rachel comes back at him with, what do you do all night walking out in the fog? Why aren't you sleeping well? You've never had a problem sleeping as long as I've known you until the last week or so. Are you out there trying to catch Spring Heel Jack yourself? I love how for an audio medium, she spells it out. Your 5'10", 168-pound frame or whatever it is. I'm like, okay, we got it. You just saying you're no match for a guy who's been silently killing women out on broad lawns and parking lots and escaping the police. You didn't have to give me that. I thought it was a little obvious, kind of funny, made me laugh while rolling my eyes a little bit. Do you think you're going to catch him? Maybe you're trying to catch Anne. Get out. I wish Rachel would just understand that it was his job. Now, granted, Anne did come on to him once. I think that was episode 2, but he turned her down to go back to Rachel, and Rachel doesn't even know about that. There's no reason for her to be behaving this way outside of pure jealousy that is unfounded. So we're getting frustrated with Rachel as he's walking to Anne's because, of course, he has to go tell her that they found the story. Maybe not the best choice on his part, but it's what he does. So he goes to Anne's house. He's listening to the radio on the way. Of course, Kevin is the radio DJ at all times of day or night, and I love that part of his call sign here in the late night is, I'm up until you go to sleep. I swear to you, it's in his head. So he goes and he talks to Anne. He tells her about the murder. They have this uproar about actually the cops being in plainclothes and not marked. It made it easier for Jack to strike. And there's a thing in the short story that basically says, you know what? It proved that he was one of us. He was a student because he knew who the cops were and who the students were. In spite of the undercover cops, he was still able to strike. And now this is the real problem, not a upsetting of civil liberties. The next day, a letter addressed to Henry in blood arrives at the station, kind of mirroring what we're seeing in the letter in 1976, right? And it's saying, I have my type, and those girls are everywhere. I'm going to do this again. The police can't catch me. I've been reading your columns. I like what you have to say. Pay attention. I'm going to be starting a new game. I'll send the next one to the police. Keep this just between you and me. So he's going to send another letter to the police? What the is he going to do? It's amazing. Anne and Henry have a disagreement about what to do. Henry's thinking, this is evidence. I should take it to the police. Anne's like, Henry, don't you understand? This might be a prank. We don't even know if this is real. It might not even be real blood. It might all be a prank. So if it is the real guy, we have a direct connection as reporters to the murderer. He reads your column and he reached out to you. Or if it's a prank, what does it matter? We'll sit on this tonight. We'll think about it and we'll call the police tomorrow, maybe. So he goes along with it. Chelsea at one point bursts in and they're like, dude, knock on the door. This is private shit. And she's like, in her bratty way, fine, I'll just steal shit from my dad, like the evidence photos, and give it to you while you write all the stories. I get it. Chelsea has a right to be upset here. But the character is played so kind of self-righteous and bratty that what happens made me happy, because they, being Henry and Anne, leave and they go off to discuss things, and Chelsea starts walking out. She hears someone, who's that? Oh, Officer Friendly. You shouldn't be out alone at night, Chelsea. I don't want to be seen with one of my dad's employees. I'll be fine. You go on ahead. So she walks alone after a police officer offered to help her. And she starts hearing noises like she's being followed. And at first it's a real tough bravado, which is kind of the character we've seen. You can't scare me. My dad's chief of police. And then we start seeing her get really, or hearing her rather, get really frightened. And it was the one moment that I was like, Chelsea's a real person. There's something beneath that bravado that we weren't given until this very moment. And I wish that we had seen a little bit more of that, because it would have made this much more tragic. As she's saying, fine, you can try to keep up with me if you want, but my dad's a police officer and you're never going to see me again. She'd be dead. And that's the end of episode 4, which was called, and I still don't understand why, Drive Slow, Walk Fast. Nobody was driving in this episode. There was never a car. Walk fast to or from what? Is Rachel driving fast because she's jumping to jealousy? Are they walking slow because they're not calling the police? I don't understand the name of this episode. And that's all I have to say. Except that the next episode is titled Snow Angels. But this is the episode that they made snow angels in. The two of them lying on the snow making snow angels. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this Night Shift movie-ish vlog for the podcast of Strawberry Spring. Strawberry Spring. This has been episode 4. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss episode 5 or any of the other Night Shift vlogs, followed by the Long Walk, and then we're getting into the Dead Zone. And I was about to say Gwendy's Final Task, which I think is going to be posted before this video, the latest publication that I just reviewed. I think it'll be posted a day or two before this video. So if you haven't seen that, check it out. And if you want to follow me on social media or support the channel through Patreon, all of those links are down below in the description. See you guys next time.